Oh, that'd be fine. All right, amen, amen. Good to be saved? Amen. Good to be in church? Amen. Okay, see if you say that when it's all over. All right, I'm going to mention a couple things about the book table, only because we're desperate. But I got a couple things out there that are new. This is, that is the fourth edition of the Understandable History book, Understandable History of the Bible. That is, let's see. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is about the 8th printing. This is different in from the third edition in that I had 50 pages on two split subjects. One is the English Standard Version, which is kind of like the current hot item amongst the fundamentalists or liberals or whatever they are. And then also information on the MEV, Modern English Version. And the Modern English Version, some people are being caught up with it because they say, well, it comes from the Textus Receptus. And I'll just tell you up front, I was surprised when I looked at the MEV, because it's actually, the New King James isn't good, but the MEV isn't as good as that. But I will tell you this. We were talking about, Brother Craig, we were talking about your brother going home yesterday. Mike Collingwood, back in 1987, the very first edition of that book was printed by his brother, Mike Collingwood. And they printed 1,000 of them. It was a little white covered book about that big, and we sold that, and that paid the printing for the answer book, and just back and forth over the years. But that's how this whole thing got launched, through Mike's efforts. But anyway, so that is back there. This one, I kind of wrote this by accident. It's called Why We Believe the King James Bible. And Bible Literature Missionary Foundation, they're down in Shelbyville, Tennessee. They've done most of my printing for about 35 years. And about 2-3 years ago, Brother Bobby Lamont, they were celebrating their 50th anniversary. So he called me up and he said, we're having a 50th year commemorative Bible printed up, and we'd like something in there on why we believe the King James Bible. So I wrote him up about 16 pages, and when I'm doing it, I'm thinking, boy, this would be a good book. So I add a little bit to it. It is about 27 pages, but it's a great handout. When somebody says, hey, why do you guys believe? There it is. Now, you can see the difference between a real brief answer and an in-depth answer, but if you just want to give something to somebody, that may be a good one. And then if you're familiar with the answer book, it's the little book that looks like this, only it's got a dark blue cover. And that's been, I think, about 10 or 11 printings. This is the second answer book. The first answer book covers charges brought against our King James Bible, about 62 of them. This one starts at number 63 and goes to number 90. Some of the stuff that's covered in here is where should a Bible believer begin in defending their Bible? I get this a lot. People say, well, where do I start as far as, when I'm going to talk to somebody about this, what's the first thing I ask? And so that's covered. This is one. Isn't the Bible settled in heaven? That's kind of one of those liberal things that they hide. Well, the Bible's settled in heaven. Yeah, but I need one for visitation. Isn't the King James Bible written in Old English, which we will deal with tonight? What's the difference between the fats and the vats in different King James Bibles? I deal with that. Can you correct the originals with the King James Bible? That is in here. Aren't conservative translations trustworthy? And several others. In fact, as I speak, the third answer book, which would be after this one, this goes to 90. That one goes from 91 to, I think, 125. As far as charges brought against our Bible. So those are out there on the table. But guys, look, I don't want you to think you have to go by and buy something, because you sure don't. You can feel free just to go by and leave money. All right, we're going to talk about the King James Bible, because even King James Bible believers labor under a misconception that the King James Bible is written in Old English. Now, part of the reason is because of the font that was used and the spelling. The font that was used, we would call it Gothic. It's very ornate, ye old print shop, that kind of stuff. But the fact is that Geneva, which actually came out before the King James, 1557 was New Testament, 1560 was the Old, used Roman type, just like the King James. I have no idea why Barker, the printer for the King James, used that type, because it's very hard to read. It is just not easy to read. And then you have things like son, spelled S-O-N-N-E, and things like that. I can show you in a King James Bible the word said, spelled 4 different ways in one book. It's spelled S-A-I-D, S-A-I-D-E, S-A-Y-D, S-A-Y-D-E. You say, well, that's a mistake. The smallest unit of preservation promised to us is not a letter. The smallest unit of preservation promised to us is a word. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but what? My words. And when you have to explain this to people, because I tell people, the guys engage in what I call conviction poker, which is I'll see your conviction and raise your conviction. And so you say you believe the King James Bible, and they go, well, you believe the words, I even believe the letters. And then they'll go through that VATS charade. And you ask them, well, what's the smallest unit of preservation? A jot or a tittle. And a jot is like the dot of an I, and a tittle's like the cross of a T. Okay, there's 2 problems wrong with that statement. 2 problems with that statement. Number one, the Lord said that the jots and tittles would be around until the law is fulfilled. Do we know somebody that fulfilled the law? Yeah. So by the cross, it was all taken care of. So we don't need the jots and tittles. But the second thing is actually a misrepresentation. They always say a jot is like the dot of an I. Let me ask you this. Is the dot of an I a freestanding letter? No, it is not. A jot is. Is the cross of a T a freestanding letter? No, it is not. But a tittle is. So the smallest unit of preservation is a word, and so God preserves the words. Now, I want you to know I am not in favor of changing the spelling. I don't trust the people in the printing companies, okay? I really don't. I guess it's the conspiracy theory that runs in me, but I don't want them to mess with my book. But we're going to talk tonight about Old English and Middle English and English. What we're talking about is the history of the Bible in English, in our language. I got some stuff here to pass. Guys, I guess you can pass these out if you got those, or sell them to them if you can. Make them pay. Yeah, why don't you do one per household, and if you got some more extras, if you got some extras, brother, just let them know, and then somebody can put their hand up to get them. Have you ever heard anybody say this? There's like 200 English Bibles out there. You ever hear that? Well, fact is that there have been 560, and you're holding the list in your hand. This list is a compilation of a couple that I found, and then I've added probably 150 that were either overlooked or more recent to it. But we're going to look at this list, and you can take that home with you. That way you don't have to say there's 560. How do you know? Because some guy said that. Doesn't mean a thing. You got the evidence in your hand. If you have that, what I want you to notice, and when you get it, is that first off, there was never a complete Bible printed in Old English. Never. There was only one ever done in Middle English, which is very famous. We'll talk about that. But here's the thing. People say, well, the King James, it says these and thous, and that's Old English. Actually, your King James Bible, believe it or not, is the first version ever printed in a solidified modern English. Old English developed around 450 and continued till about 1100, okay? Well, I think you can see that's like it passed out of usage about 500 years before the King James Bible was even translated. And if you say, well, no, the King James is Old English. Okay, then what does this say? Si gumma Geshik ba Quen. Well, if you read Old English. See, I tell guys, you and I cannot read Old English. We could not read Old English. We could not read Middle English. But this is a very important statement here. It says, the man saw the woman. Guys, that's a very important statement. Sio quen geshek bon guman. Well, that's the other half of the equation. The woman saw the man and ran. But the reason I want those up there is because you can say it over and over and over. The King James Bible is not written in Old English, but you can see from that not you, not I, we cannot understand Old English. We could not recognize it. We could not read it. Now, have you got your papers? Do this. Okay. We'll skip over the top here. You can look at that later. But where it talks about the foundation, Old English. And these are, in Old English, there were only 8 printings of some portion of the Bible in English. If you look at your paper, the earliest was 735. The latest was 990. And what you have in there is you have 2 copies of Psalms in Old English, 2 copies of the Gospel, 2 copies of the Pentateuch, which are the first 5 books of the Bible, and then 1 of the Gospel of Matthew and 1 of the Gospel of John. But that's all that's ever been translated into Old English. And again, we couldn't read it. We couldn't understand it. And then you'll look next, it talks about on the front page there, Middle English. And incidentally, there were 8 also in Middle English. Now, Middle English went from about 1100 to 1450. So to think about that, that's still about 150 years before your King James Bible was translated. Middle English ceased to be used as a language. And if you say, well, I think it's in Middle English, okay. Laud me, stirs not want sal me. Tell me what that says? Do you know, y'all know what that says? Everybody in this room knows what that says. The Lord is my shepherd. But you see, guys, we can't read Old and we can't read Middle. And so your King James Bible is not, well, you know what? There was a glass of water around here somewhere. Does anybody know what happened to it? The guys that moved the pulpit, did you steal my water? Okay, thank you very much. I also need some notes. Or we take an offering, we could stall that way. In Middle English, there was 1 copy of the Gospel and the book of Acts, 1 copy of Revelation from the French. Well, who would want that? 2 copies of Psalms. 1 was a portion, just portions of the New Testament. 1 was of the Gospels. 1 was of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, and the first 4 of the New Testament, the Gospels. And then probably the most important, and really, it was the beginning. This was like the beginning of a snowfall, and it was 1380, and it was the printing of the Wycliffe Bible. You know, we moved out to Idaho about 4 years ago, and one thing that Idaho is known for is mild winters, kind of like Toledo. Really mild winters, though. I mean, you know, it might snow during the day, but by the next day, it all melts off. And we were staying in the house next to the church one Wednesday, and it started to snow. Okay, first year I was there. Thank you very much, brother. It started to snow, and snow is such a non-issue there that the church doesn't even own a plow truck, or most people don't own a plow truck. The church has a little John Deere Gator with a blade on it, and the poor guy that plows snow is open to the elements. And it started to snow about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock, I mean, it was like it was a little snow, it was pretty snow, it was, wow, that's a lot of snow. And I told Kathy, I said, he is going to get swamped. So I threw a snow shovel in my pickup truck, and I went over and I said, look, I'll shovel around the doors. And he said, look, I got a little John Deere lawn tractor with a blade, and he said, if you'll plow the small walks with that. And so he started about 1 o'clock, I started about 5 o'clock, and literally we plowed snow right through the service, the midweek service, until about 11:30 that night. But you know, when it just started. You ever see how it starts like a nice little snow? And then it keeps coming and coming and coming. Well, the Wycliffe in 1380 was like, that was the beginning of the flurries. That was the beginning of the Bible in English. I am going to say this. I say this with a little asterisk because I'm not prepared to stand on this. I have always said that the Wycliffe came from the Latin Vulgate, Jerome's Latin Vulgate, the corrupt one that follows the Alexandrian manuscripts. There may be evidence that it did not. There may be evidence that the Wycliffe Bible did indeed do an end run around the Alexandrian family of manuscripts and was actually from the Textus, well, not the Textus Receptus, but the Greek that the Textus Receptus we know of came from. So the reason I'm telling you both is because, you know, like when I teach, I tell my students something. I say, look, guys, I'm not sure of this, but I want you to hear it. I want you to know it. I want you to be aware and familiar with it. So there's a chance that the Wycliffe Bible was indeed from the Antiochian manuscripts. Now, if you look at this, and down at the bottom, it talks about modern English, and modern English started about 1450 and is still gone. In fact, it would do well to stop, actually. But modern English was 450. Now you guys, you guys build houses, you put basements, correct? Right? Okay. When I built houses in Florida, there's no basements, and in Idaho, they don't build basements. A lot of the houses like ours, we have a crawl space, but some of them they put the concrete down. And if you know anything about concrete, there's two kinds of concrete. There's the stuff they poured yesterday, and that's concrete. And then there's this very same slab about a month later, and that is concrete. That is capital letters flashing off and on. And so you say, what's it doing? It's setting up. When they pour it, it has to set up. So, and cure. And that's actually what took place here. What took place in the English language was, it went from Old English right around here to Middle English, and then around 1450 began the development of modern English. And believe it or not, that really went on until about 1600. And right around 1600, the very last, best way I can say it is the last instabilities in the language cured. There were some pronoun changes that took place at the end of the 17th century, the 1500s, or into the 16th century. And so English was not a reliable enough language to really, to give us a perfect Bible. Which may have something to do with why some of the English Bibles before the King James, never caught fire like the King James did. But what you'll find, if you look here in your paper, and some of the most famous ones, look in the back of the first page. You have William Tyndale's. And by the way, William Tyndale did not translate the entire Bible. He translated the New Testament, portions of the Old. Then he was caught. He was strangled. They tied him to the stake and strangled him before they burned him. But he was burned at the stake. The last thing he said was his dying prayer. If you look at the last part of that paragraph, it says his dying prayer was, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." And he got that prayer answered. And you hear about Henry VIII, and they talk about Henry VIII. You know, I think he had one wife after another because he wanted a male heir. And something was wrong with these women. They were all broke, gave him daughters. That's what he thought. But so he wanted to get rid of his wife, and the Catholic Church wouldn't let him. So he just did away with the Catholic Church. And he started the Anglican Church, or the Church of England, which is basically it is the same format as the Catholic Church, except the head of the church is the King of England instead of the Pope in Rome. But we used to call it, when I was Roman Catholic, we used to call Episcopalians and Lutherans, they were Catholics that flunked Latin. But here's what he said. He said he wanted the Bible to be translated into English, into the vulgar English. Now, guys, if we talk about somebody being vulgar, we think they're using foul language, correct? But vulgar simply means common. That's why if I can use this word, original Latin, the Latin of 150 A.D., it was a Latin copy of the Antiochian text that your King James Bible is from. And that Bible became so popular that they called it, in Latin, they called it the Common Bible. But in Latin, the word for common is vulgar. So it was known as the Vulgate because it was common. And then about 1680, the Roman Catholic Church was having trouble because all these people are reading this Latin Bible that came out of Antioch, and it was kind of messing up their religious services. So they had Jerome translate the corrupt Alexandrian text into Latin and named it the Vulgate. Now, I'm sure in this list farther along, I think it's in the 20th century, somewhere back there, somebody brought out a new translation. Now let me ask you a question. If it's a new translation, and let's say they published it today, you could call it the newest translation, right? You could even make a claim, it wouldn't be true, but you could even make a claim that it's the most accurate translation. But if it just came out today, how many people do you think got it? So you couldn't call it the Common Bible. And yet, some decades ago, somebody brought out an English translation and named it the Common Bible, which is kind of like, how can you do that when nobody's even got it? And that's what the Roman Catholic Church did. They took Jerome's brand new corrupted Latin and named it the Vulgate, the Common Bible. Therefore, when you read history and you read that the church was embracing the Vulgate, you think they were embracing Jerome's corrupt text. The problem was that everybody ignored Jerome and his 380 Latin translation. And then the Catholic Church found out how to make theirs popular and get rid of the other one. They gathered up all of the old Latin Vulgates and their owners and burned them. And that pretty much put a stop to it. The old Latin Vulgate, now if you deal in the manuscripts, it is now known as the Italic. But that is the old Vulgate. That was the one that the church used. So when Tyndale, his New Testament came out in 1525, he was doing something that was illegal. The Roman Catholic Church had proclaimed that you could not read a Bible in prayer in English. You could not pray in English. Punishable, are you ready for this? By death. That's why Tyndale had to go outside of England to print his Bible. But he died on the stake, and in comes Henry VIII, and he said, I want my people to have a Bible in their language. And I'm going to give you guys a word, and if you could get anything through your head, get this word through, because I'm going to show you one of the most important words in history. Common. You know, I told you I wrote about 30-some books on the King James issue or some other stuff. And the Bible issue can be very technical. You're studying a lot of Greek manuscripts and such. And when you write a book, like the Understandable History, when you write a book, you have two audiences, and you cannot address both. You have to choose one or the other. And the two audiences that you can address are academia or the common guy in the pew. Now, if you address academia, you'll get this. I get these guys, they come to my meetings, I can tell who they are and where they come from by the way they talk. If you address academia, they all want to talk about, you all want to talk kind of, like 5 stories higher than they live at. Dr. Gipp, your treatise on the second aorist tense there in 2 Corinthians was epic. Now, if you heard 2 guys talking like that, what would you guys do? Let's talk about guns. Right? If you address academia, it goes over the head of the common man, and he does nothing with it. But the most dangerous person on this planet, it's not a preacher. The most dangerous person on this planet is the common man with a perfect Bible. But if you address the common man, then you guys get something. That's why the most important word in my history book is understandable history of the Bible. Because if the common man gets it, he goes and does something with it, but academia is offended that you have not addressed them. And I get some flack, from those guys on that. But guys, Vulgate, the original Latin translation of the Antiochian manuscripts was called Common. When it was translated in 157 A.D. into Syrian, they named it the Peshitta. Do you know what that word means in Syrian? Common. So you have 2 of the 2nd century's most important translations, one into Latin, one into Syrian, and they became so well known that they swept their areas by usage, and they became known as the Common Bible. And if you read your Bible, if you remember this, guys, the Pharisees were academia. But doesn't it say in the Bible, but the common men heard him gladly? And so God had to put this book in common language. So here's Henry VIII, and he says, I want my people to have their Bible in vulgar, common English. And that was the same thing that King James desired. So in 15, if you're looking on the back of the 2nd page, 2nd paragraph at the top, in 1535, Miles Coverdale says the first complete Bible. Here's what Coverdale did. He took Tyndale's New Testament. He sifted through it. He took some of the stuff that Tyndale had done. I know Tyndale had done Joshua. He might have done the Pentateuch. But he took what Tyndale had done, and then he finished it off. And so he printed the first complete English Bible in modern English, though the language itself, as I told you, was not solidified yet. It was not cured. But he printed it in English. It was first complete Bible printed, translated into English. William Tyndale, if you look at the paragraph, died before he could realize his dream of placing a copy of the entire Bible in English into the hands of the common people. Although he had worked on portions of the Old Testament, he was not able to complete it. With his death, this task fell to Miles Coverdale. Coverdale was working with him, who had worked with Tyndale on his English translation. It must have blessed Tyndale as he languished in a prison cell awaiting death to hear that his old friend, Miles Coverdale, had completed the work, and in 1535, a year before Tyndale was to die, published it. Coverdale's Bible was the first complete Bible to be translated into English using the pure text from Antioch. Okay, now I'm going to give you guys a kind of a quiz. Remember I gave you a test yesterday and I told you how to pass? And I bet you blew it. So I'm going to give you one more chance. Okay. You see up here where it says number 17, William Tyndale? Okay. The Bible he printed is known as the Tyndale Bible. Can you figure out why? Yeah. Okay, so you see the second one, Miles Coverdale. Do you know what the Bible he translated, do you know what it was known as? The Coverdale Bible. So that brings us to this one, the Thomas Matthews Bible. Would anybody like to guess who translated that one? Not Thomas Matthews. Thomas Matthews didn't exist. Now, there probably was somebody in England named Thomas Matthews, but he had nothing to do with that Bible. The guy that printed the Thomas Matthews Bible was a guy named John Rogers, which I think in Greek comes out Thomas Matthews. But here's what it says. John Rogers had worked with Tyndale and Coverdale on translation of the Bible. Seeing Tyndale's fate and fearing he too would be arrested and burned, he used the alias Thomas Matthews. Thomas Matthews was actually two of the names of his children. I think he had 10 kids, and one of his sons was Thomas, and one of them was Matthew. So he took two of his sons' names and called the John Rogers Bible, it should have been, he called it the Thomas Matthews Bible, because he knew if he put his name on it, he might end up getting burned at the stake. So he had a Thomas Matthews Bible, and then got burned at the stake. Do you ever stop thinking about this? If the guy had just put his name on it, he'd be famous. John Rogers had, seeing Tyndale's fate and fearing he too would be arrested and burned, he used the alias Thomas Matthews when he published his own English translation in 1537. This Bible caught the eye of England's King Henry VIII, who authorized it to be sold to the public at large and read by the public. Ironically, the man who changed his name to escape the stake died on it in 1555, while his friend and partner, Miles Coverdale, who operated under no false name, died of old age in 1569. So this is the order of the Bibles that, let's see how this works. Ooh, look at that. And no batteries. That's amazing. All right. So in 1525, you have the Tyndale, which actually is a New Testament. And then in 1535, you have the Coverdale. Now, keep in mind, we're now looking at translations into English that were translated from the same Greek text that your King James Bible is translated from. These are the Bibles that, this is the text that came out of Antioch. You know, I told you this list, if you look at it, there's 560 Bibles. And what I tell people is there's really not 560 Bibles. There's actually not even 500 Bibles. There's not actually 400 Bibles or 300 Bibles. There's not 200 Bibles. There's not actually 100 Bibles. There's not 50 Bibles. There's not 25 Bibles. There's not 10 Bibles. Guys, there's not 5 different Bibles out there. There's not 3 different Bibles. But there's not one. There's only ever been 2. Because Greek manuscripts, every Bible out there has been printed from a Greek text that comes from one of 2 places. Either Antioch in Syria, which was the head of the New Testament church, or Alexandria, Egypt, which was the head of academia. Everybody remember all those apostles that rushed down to Egypt to evangelize it in the book of Acts? You know what God said? Head for Europe. Get as far away from that place as you can. So if you walk into a Bible bookstore and say, Gipp, look right there, 25 Bibles. How can you say there's only one? There's only 2. See that King James? That's Antioch. The other 24, they're Alexandria. There's only 2 Bibles. And when you look at this, everything you look at, 560? Nope. Every Bible on a sheet of paper you have in front of you either came from Antioch or Alexandria. There's not 560. There's not 500. There are 2 Bibles represented on these 15 sheets of paper, 15 pages you got. In 1537, then you had the Matthews. And then Miles Coverdale was asked to look at look at number 20. In 1538, he was asked if he would just kind of go over these and make some corrections. You say, how can you correct a Bible? You can if it's got a mistake in it. You say, weren't those a perfect word of God? Absolutely not. They were on the right track, but the language hasn't healed yet or been solidified yet. And there's another reason why, and I'll talk to you about that. But look at number 20. In 1538, Miles Coverdale was commissioned by Thomas Cromwell, secretary to Henry VIII, and Archbishop Thomas Cranmer to complete a revision of Matthew's Bible to be used in churches. Due to its large size, and it was a very large Bible, this Bible became known as the Great Bible. It is also sometimes referred to as the Cromwell Bible because he initiated the translation, or Cranmer Bible because he wrote the preface. It's sometimes called the White Church Bible because that was the name of the printer And it's also known as the chained Bible because it was chained to the altar of the Anglican Church so that no one would walk off with it. They'd have to have a strong back, but they'd have to do it. All right, then after that, number 21, you have the Taverner. The Taverner Bible, 1539. Now, I got to tell you something. I do not proofread people's books. I am working on about 5 books right now, and every now and then somebody will send me an unsolicited manuscript, and they'll say, I'm writing a book, would you proofread it? And I said, no. Well, I want you to publish it. I said, well, the company, I have some protocols for my company for everything to be proofread, and I'm out of the loop. That does 2 things. Number 1, it frees up my time. Secondly, if one of my friends writes a book and it's a dud, I didn't reject it. My reader did. I just had a guy, he wants us to publish his book, and he says, please, would you just please look at it? And I said, brother, you're asking me to lie to you. Because if I tell you I will look at it, I'm telling you guys, I spend my days looking at stuff, studying, researching, like I said, working on 5 books. I said, a guy sent me an unsolicited manuscript, and like 3 years later, I found it behind my chair in the living room. Now you say, don't you feel bad? No, I didn't ask him to send it. But if I'd have told that guy to send his manuscript, I'd have just never got it done. But I did this for a pastor in Australia many years ago. He wanted to write a book about the King James Bible. Now, you know what the Bible says in Psalm 12, 6 and 7? The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in the furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt preserve them, O Lord, thou shalt keep them, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. I don't know what you think the 7 times are, but let me tell you, I don't know. Everybody likes to say, well, you know what that is? Well, I would like to know, and I really don't know that you know. And so here's what I've heard. I have heard that there were 7 English Bibles before the King James, or 6 before the King James, and it's the 7th. And so that's the 7 times. I have heard that the Bible was translated into 6 different languages, and English was the 7th, and that's the 7 times. I have heard that the first time is the 1611 King James Bible, and you know the King James Bible has, get this down, listen carefully, never been revised. The 1611 Bible has never been revised. There have been additions. And I think the 1769 is probably the text of the one you got in your lap. That was the 7th one. Well, this guy wrote this book in Australia, this pastor, and he said, would you proof it? And I said, okay, I'll do it for lots of money. And he pushed this thing about 6 Bibles before the King James, and the King James was the 7th English Bible, so that's the